Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and yeah, the last episode of Loki is now over, and I just wanted to give my thoughts on the actual show. Now, this part is going to be the non-spoiler part. Without spoiling the show, I think the show has great acting, amazing visuals, for the most part, decently well and likable characters, and a great story. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wow, these are not the things I'm seeing online. Well, partially. I definitely see a section of people that don't seem to like the show, which is, you have your own opinion. But when I end up looking and reading a lot of the comments and sort of the articles and stuff that gets posted, all the arguments seem to be, well, some of them are definitely right, but some of them are a little off. All I can say is, don't judge a show based on what other people say. Actually watch it yourself. So if you're watching this thinking you don't know whether or not you want to watch the show, because there's a lot of people saying that it's bad, just watch it for yourself. I think the story is really interesting, and that I enjoy the fact that it's being told through Loki's perspective, because it's also being told through the audience's perspective. We as the audience don't know anything the same way Loki doesn't, so we learn as Loki does about the truths and the lies. So yeah, I think the show's pretty interesting. To me, it's on tie with WandaVision, tied for second place, as Falcon and the Winter Soldier was my favorite of the shows that come out so far. Now, we're going to be entering spoiler territory. I'm mainly going to be addressing a lot of the arguments that are against Loki, and why some of them make sense, and why some of them really don't. And why people have these arguments is because typically they're the type of people that just kind of want to shit on things and focus entirely on the bad parts of the show, or focus on the more negative parts without actually seeing the whole picture. Now, one of the arguments being placed is the fact that the TVA can't seem to catch Sylvie, but they have purportedly caught beings like Thanos, meaning since they mentioned Titans, and since they have a number of Infinity Stones, maybe they caught Thanos multiple times, or even Doctor Strange, or maybe even Scarlet Witch, since she's messing with the Darkhold in her own show. So how can they catch these people, but Sylvie got away? Actually, I think the only problem I have with this, because I think the rest of this is pretty baloney, I really only have two problems. One, Sylvie got away because she kept temp padding throughout a number of different timelines and places, until she eventually found herself in Apocalypse. However, it was stated that the temp pad actually has a limited amount of juice. Now, she only started as a child. That means she would have needed to get a new set of temp pad every other day or other week. I don't really know exactly how much it can hold. Now, it can be arguable that she got away in the first place because because she was a child, and that they underestimated her capabilities, so it makes sense that she might have been able to steal and get away. However, how they caught others, like Thanos or Doctor Strange, these beings that are very powerful, could have easily been done very similarly to how Loki was caught. See, my second problem with this bit of the argument are the time rods. I don't know, in the comics they had guns called retcons, but these time sticks are kind of weird. But what everyone seems to forget is a adult grown-up Sylvie has dealt with the TVA her entire life. She knows how to avoid them. If they were to catch beings like Thanos or Doctor Strange or Scarlet Witch, it would be done very similar to how they did it to Loki. They came out of nowhere and they didn't have time to prepare themselves, and they got hit with one of those slow-mo settings, which they never actually use ever after that first bit. Is one of my few problems with the actual show. That means that beings as powerful as Thanos, Doctor Strange, and Scarlet Witch can actually be caught, and as we know, they have power dampening abilities in the TVA, meaning powerful beings or magic users might not even be able to fight back. People assume that the TVA are going to come after these guys when they're at their full power, ready to fight against them. No, they're going to come at them when they break the timeline, and that could be at any point. It can be when they're in battle, or when they decided to pick up a banana instead of an apple. And as we've seen from shots of the outside of the TVA is nearly infinite, with an infinite amount of resources. Now, this is another problem I have with the show, is that you get this really amazing grand shot of Loki and Mobius looking out the window, making the TVA look massive, but we only ever get to see hallways and offices. Honestly, if we got more street views, or even a shot of them going through one of those vehicles flying through the sky, I think it would actually give a much greater scale on the actual size size of the TVA. But because of the fact that we only get hallways and office shots, it's very one note. Another is, if Sylvie could get away, why not others like Thanos, Spider-Man, or Ant-Man, who have special abilities that make them especially good at escaping? Well, Thanos can't use any of his Infinity Stones, so he's kind of stuck. I say this because I see in a lot of comments, how could they even catch Thanos? Now, Spider-Man and Ant-Man are a little tricky. Without a doubt, I think they definitely have broken the rules before. I don't think not as much as Loki's. Also, we're talking about different types of Spider-Man and Ant-Man, so they could have easily captured weaker, not as impressive versions. But again, Sylvie got away when she was just a child, when they underestimated her. I already mentioned my problem with the temp pad problem that already happened, but again, if they caught these heroes and beings off guard, especially since they're a bunch of guys that show up out of nowhere and suddenly you're moving 1/16 the speed, you're not really going to be able to do much even if you are Spider-Man or Ant-Man. Another argument is that if these beings were captured, since we find out in the last episode that they're not actually disintegrated and more like sent into sort of like an end dimension where they're being consumed by Alioth, if they were captured, then wouldn't beings like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch be able to defeat Alioth? Well, this is where things get a little tricky. We have never seen Doctor Strange or Scarlet Witch use any form of enchantment. Yes, obviously, they should have the capabilities and powers to do it, but we've never seen it. So if we don't see something, then we can assume that they don't have it. Yes, this is kind of a weird argument, but whatever. Now, without a doubt, I think they absolutely have the capabilities to fight against Alioth and consistently escape from them, but assuming they have no capabilities of enchanting or controlling Alioth, since we've never been shown that they have that, except for maybe Scarlet Witch, who obviously has that ability. In fact, I think it works almost exactly the same. Then why couldn't they have just done that? Well, remember, the actual infinite timeline, the circle that you see, that's all being manipulated by Kang, or He Who Remains. It was really just Kang. That's not the natural way the universe actually is supposed to run. The universe, like its timelines, are supposed to be free-flowing and ever-changing, an actual multiverse, but he controls it, meaning he knows exactly how everything's going to happen in the area that he controls. So it could have easily been that Doctor Strange or Scarlet Witch or even Thanos may not even be captured that much. Which is weird because, again, Scarlet Witch is, in her own sort of thing, is also a Nexus event. Or maybe they don't bother trying to capture her because she's very powerful and she tries to sort of keep them there. I don't know. We're talking about just having the ability to defeat Alioth. I think out of anyone, maybe Scarlet Witch has the actual ability to do it, perhaps even easier than Sylvie. But when it comes to anyone else, we've never seen anyone else use any form of enchanting abilities. We can just assume they don't have them, and that they can't really do anything against Alioth, considering the fact that Alioth has the ability to destroy both time and matter, or consume it. The next argument is, Loki's really weak and he gets his ass beat even though he's a god. Well, I mean, we've already previously stated that although they are gods in the sense that they are worshipped like gods, the MCU specifically retcons this. They're only called gods by the perceptions of humans. But in reality, we all know that they're just extremely advanced futuristic people, which, are the Asgardians. Loki specifically isn't even an Asgardian. He's a frost giant. Now, I don't understand this argument. In the first episode, he gets caught, but he literally pulls an Uno reverse card. He outsmarts Mobius, and I think it was Hunter B-15. He just fucking beats her in a straight up fight, now that he was ready. Meaning that had he actually fought them without getting caught off guard, he would have absolutely won. One of the arguments that I actually saw, I watched a lot of Shad's videos. If you know Shadiversity, he makes a few videos on this, generally sitting on the show, and I'm a big fan, even though I disagree with him completely. Another problem that I semi-agree with is the power scaling. Like, how can Loki fight Thor and the Hulk and just get beaten by a regular guy, even though we know that Loki gets his ass beat all the time against a Thor that holds back on him because they're brothers and is actually just trying to talk him down every single time. I mean, yes, he's extremely durable, but we've never actually seen much sort of big feats of strength from him compared to a regular human. At least he's stronger than a regular human, but he's not like superhuman. People often point back at the the supermarket fight in the Roxcon, where he gets his ass beat by some big trucker dude. Now again, we don't even know the effects of how the enchantments could actually work. Maybe it breaks people's physical limits, allowing them to be stronger than normal, but it's never mentioned, so we're not going to count that. I do semi-agree that Loki definitely would have a better chance, but also remember, this is a much more different Loki. People don't like the fact that Loki is so different because especially since this is 2012 Loki, but you have to understand that in the first episode, he was exactly 2012 Loki, and it never worked out for him because the TVA already knew exactly how he was, exactly how he would act. So for that, he knew he had to change. Also, in the first episode, it stated that time is kind of weird in the TVA, so we also don't really know how long Loki has actually been there. After all, there was a small time skip where we saw him at an office, I think it was Mobius's office, studying up about the TVA. Again, we don't know how long that was. We don't know how long it is between all of the times they are going through papers. We don't know how long he is in the time prison. Now, personally, this is a problem I also have with the show, but it's not such a big glaring problem, since it kind of makes sense since the TVA is supposedly outside of time. So we never really know how he changes, or we don't know how long it took, but we know he does because he has to, because him being the way he is now, he learns will only lead him to death. So he changes from the ruthless killer to a sort of detective-y Doctor Who archetype type character. Now back to the actual fighting. It was mentioned before that yeah, he gets his ass beat by a trucker dude, and again, we don't know the effects of magic on that actual trucker, but again, the reason I mentioned about him changing was because this is a different Loki. He's obviously trying not to kill this guy, even though, yes, they're in apocalypse, they're about to die, but obviously he's slowly changing from his more ruthless ways. But also he knows that talking to him would give him more information than outright killing him. That's why he tries to talk the entire time, and all he really does is try and resist. Or at the very least, attack without actually killing or hurting incredibly, because he wants information. That's what Loki wants. We're shown many times later of his actual true capabilities. When he's not surprised, when he's not caught off guard, he is very capable, able to take out multiple of those fucking blue sweater wearing guards, even the royal guards that were in the time place with the timekeepers, those fucking guys with the weird pointy versions of the batons. He was able to fight multiple of them on his own without the help of Sylvie. Speaking of Sylvie, they're shitting on Loki to make Sylvie look cooler and better, which is not true. I see a lot of Loki as a sidekick to Sylvie comments in a lot of videos that I watch about Loki, which I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense, because throughout the entire show, they're always working together, always gaining the upper hand over each other. It's never a one-sided fight. It's always somewhat equal. Never understood this at all. This is one of the worst arguments I've ever seen. I see a lot of, they're beating him down to make female characters look better, except that Sylvie is literally just as Loki would be, in the sense that she gets her ass beat sometimes. I mean, that scene where she kicks the door down and gets blown back, that was very Loki, because that's all we ever see Loki do. I don't see it much in the first two Thor movies, but Loki does have the tendency to get his ass beat. That's not anything new. Loki gets his ass beat all the time. Yes, that doesn't mean that he's, an incapable fighter or is weak. It just means that that's just part of his character, because he makes mistakes, like everyone else. But yeah, this argument about Loki and Sylvie not being equals, or Loki being a sidekick, is really annoying, because in a place where Loki fails, Sylvie makes up for it, and vice versa. Even in the last episode, right before Sylvie goes to kick the door down, she asks Loki for his opinion, meaning that his thoughts actually matter to her. Not only that, but I completely support the romance. Even though they're alternate versions of each other, they're different enough from each other that they're technically different people, even going by different names. And the romance is actually shown very nicely. How they look at each other. Tom Holland's and Sophia's acting were really great. Minor facial changes, eye twitch, frown, amazing. There was even a bit where I watched a bunch of YouTube videos of reactions, and they missed this part. When both of them are captured or being brought to the elevator, there's a small moment where Sylvie looks at Loki and says, "Are you okay?" The romance is believable and realistic. They don't immediately fall in love. I mean, they do, but they don't, they're not almost immediately over each other. And not only that, but they both still have character flaws within them. As annoyed as people were at the last episode on Sylvie, that's what Sylvie would actually do. She would actually kill him, kill Kang. He was the man that took away her childhood, took away her home, a home she can no longer go back to because of the TVA. Loki's and Sylvie's love was not enough for her to get over that fact. And Loki, who has had nobody his entire life except for his brother and maybe a few of his friends, suddenly now has her and has Mobius. Actual friends, actual people she can talk to. He can talk to about his feelings, about who he was. In my opinion, I think this makes the show incredibly deep. and gives characters a lot of depth. And this develops Loki very different from how he is in the movies, from how he started and how he was at the end, because you need to have a different type of character for Loki for him to be interesting. Nobody wants to see the exact same Loki over and over and over again, and different experiences are gonna develop a person differently. So this Loki will be very different from the Loki of 2012 and the Loki in Ragnarok, even though the slapstick comedy is still kind of there. Now, another argument I see is, even though Kang is from the 31st century, why is everything based in the 70s and so analog? Well, this is actually fairly simple. Control. The reason everything is typed on typewriters, and why everything is very analog and very 70s related, is simply for control. I mean, you even see propaganda posters like from the 70s. By keeping everything manual and not automated, people are more likely to think about their jobs rather than have free time to think for themselves. Think about it. If you're more occupied with doing literal paperwork, you'd be thinking about the paperwork, not about, I wonder how I got here or what I'm doing here. Quite simple as that. Another argument I see is that the action is bad and Sylvie can beat up people twice her size. Well, one, the action is actually kind of bad. It's very much highs and lows for me. Thankfully, I'm not there for the action. I'm just there for the story, which so far has been very good. However, the idea that Sylvie can beat up people even though she is probably a frost giant and is pretty physically capable, and not only that, but has been fighting her entire life against the TVA, who she would know exactly how to fight. Again, this argument kind of falls short. Yes, she is like maybe 100 pounds, like 120 pounds, half the weight of a lot of the males that she was fighting, but you also got to remember that she's a frost giant and that she's probably physically stronger than Loki. In fact, this is clearly made more apparent that Loki has had a very cushy life. He's not like his brother. He didn't, take the path of a warrior. He practiced magic, and he even states that when in Lamentus that him walking into the shuttle was the most walking he had ever done in his entire life, meaning he's lived a fairly pampered life, which can then explain why he's so weak, because when you're not working out or testing yourself, your body, even if you are a frost giant, will never grow stronger. But Sylvie, who has been fighting her entire life and is possibly also a frost giant, would be significantly more physically capable than him, which makes sense because both of them have different ways to approach situations. Loki uses his charm and guile, while Sylvie uses physical brute force. But both still use some form of magic that is deceiving in nature, which ties them together as Lokis. I don't understand this argument at all. I mean, it's shown in the show that there's a reason why Sylvie can fight these people, even if the actress is about 120 pounds. And yes, the action is ups and downs, definitely. The action in other movies were definitely 1,000 times better, but it wasn't bad, maybe a little overproduced. Another argument is, why are they using these sticks and not projectile weapons? Probably because you have more control with a stick. I think it was about as simple as that. Now, I do kind of agree that they should have at least some sort of projectile mode or projectile setting, especially for the, one that slows people down to 1/16th the speed. So I do have a bit of a problem with that, but it does just make sense that they're just using typical batons, especially since they've been shown as a quotation mark non-lethal force, since they're there to just take them into court. Now, finally, although I see there's definitely a lot more arguments that you can find in the actual show, or arguments that people are making, this is going to be my last one. Is it a single universe in a single timeline, or multiple universes in a single timeline? Well, after watching some of Shad's game night videos about the show, he seems to be very upset at the fact and very adamant that it is a single timeline with a single universe. However, despite how it's worded, I don't think that's the case. Now, they're not actually clear at all in the show, which is the show's problem. But from the evidence that we've seen in the animated video, you see the timekeepers use multiple lines that eventually converge into a single timeline. They also mentioned they also specifically mentioned that the multiverse was turned into the sacred timeline. And in the final episode, Kang mentioned that he found universes stacked on top of each other, meaning that universes can actually overlap, and stacked, meaning multiple universes can actually exist in that singular timeline. That little circle that you see, that might not be just a single universe. That might be multiple universes stacked on top of each other. Each thread, each line in itself might be its own universe. This can explain the different versions and variants of Loki, and this can explain why there might be a boastful, aka Black Loki, and an alligator Loki. and why they look so different from the regular Loki, because they're not the same Loki. Alright, that was about the end of the episode. We're getting close to 20 minutes. I do want to end it off with saying, to me, Loki is a good show. It's not the best show of the shows that came out, though I was really hoping for it to be. It's not exactly groundbreaking, but it is groundbreaking in what it sets up for the future of the MCU. And although the show itself has some problems, I don't think that it deserves all of the hate it's getting. And the fact that I think the only problem is that people want to see the negative things as part of the show. They want to focus on parts that they don't like and never actually stop to think about why this is happening or look back at the show. I've watched the show about 3 times now just to make sure I was getting things right. Obviously, I could have easily missed some stuff, but it seems like the arguments being made by people are kind of stupid and don't exactly make any sense. I suppose I'll leave it at that, but if you watch this video and thought to yourself, wow, this show is pretty interesting, I would suggest you give it a watch. Anyways, I hope you guys liked the video. Peace.